There we go.
Hello everyone. We are live here with Dr. McDougall. Only that today we have a special guest, Dr. Doug Lisle. And as many of you know, Dr. Doug Lisle is the psychologist for the McDougall Wellness Program and the director of research at True North Health Center. And Dr. Lisle has lectured at Stanford, Cornell, and many other universities, and of course is the co-author of The Pleasure Trap, and just an amazing book that I recommend for everyone. And more recently, he has started or founded the website Steam Dynamics at steamdynamics.org, which I will type later on in the chat. And I cannot recommend enough that you at least try once to make an appointment with Dr. Lisle, even if it's half an hour. It will truly change your life. I want to remind all of you that next week is Thanksgiving, and we will not have a webinar that next Thursday, but that would be a great time, if you have time, to go to drmcdougall.com, to his website, and look at past webinars, and you might want to watch one of the many webinars that we have done with special topics. I also want to remind everyone that in December, Dr. McDougall is doing one of his 10-day live-in programs in Santa Rosa, California. I attended that 3 years, let's see, a little bit over 3 years ago. And I cannot, again, just tell you how much that influenced my life, and I recommend that you try that. It's a perfect time of year. You go to the 10-day program, and then in January you're ready to start. Actually, you're ready to start the day you leave there. And we also have the Hawaii trip adventures in January, and all that, the Hawaii trip and the 10-day live-in program. You can sign up for that at his website, drmcdougall.com. So I would like to now welcome Dr. Lisle, who is in California, and we'll just have a very fun and exciting time together with questions that you all have submitted, which I have here. And if you want to submit any more questions, please type them on the chat. We'll do the best to get to as many as we can today. So how are you doing, Dr. Lisle?
Great to see you.
Yes.
Hey, Gustavo, you're a genius for getting this computer fixed. People have no idea how good you are.
Oh, wow.
I'm glad we're up and running. That's great.
Good. We are up and running, and I had a great time seeing you last weekend in Atlanta at the Remedy Food Conference. That was a great conference, and as usual, you presented a great lecture. You changed it, right, because of the time of year?
Right, I sure did.
Good. Well, very good. So today, before we start with the questions, I thought, we were talking a little bit earlier, that it would be a good time for you to just say a few words about this month of November and December, which is full of parties and dinners and all sort of situations for the holidays where many people will struggle. So would you just take a few minutes and talk about how we can navigate this time of year?
Yeah, just probably a few simple ideas, and that is that we have what I call the religion of eating, which we go salad, vegetables, and then more concentrated food. And I would make sure you maintain that around Thanksgiving. So the notion is if you kind of go crazy, we don't go crazy on an empty stomach, going all for the rich foods. So that's I have done this before. So on Thanksgiving, I have eaten myself up to the gills, but because I started with the low density things, then it's not that bad. You really haven't gotten that far out of line. You're not even that uncomfortable. So that's a thing to keep in mind, particularly around Thanksgiving and the holidays. The other thing has to do with all of our relatives. This is not a time for us to be engaging in any arguments with these people. And so we just have the attitude that we're just, we're trying to do a pretty good job. And that if they cross-examine us and they give us any any arguments, we say, well, they probably got a point. You know, who really knows? And I'm not sure that these people are right about everything, i.e. Dr. McDougall. The notion is, I think that these are some good ideas, but I'm not sure they're right about everything. And if we give that kind of little bit of opening to the notion that we don't have all the answers and they aren't all wrong, then we can get a lot of peace in the house around any of these kinds of discussions. So it's not worth the trouble. It's much easier to just slide past these things than it is to take them head on, unless you have Dr. McDougall's personality, at which point they asked for it. All right, so that's how I would deal with it.
Very good, thank you. Yes, that's right. But Dr. McDougall, you just don't mess with him.
No, that's it.
Dr. Lisle, one of the people here is asking what this person can do if she is allergic to all sorts of beans and legumes. I know that AJ, Chef AJ, doesn't eat any because he's also allergic, and it's perfectly fine. So what do you say?
Yeah, you just have to get your carbohydrate from other sources, so that you're going to need to make your life out of things like squashes and potatoes, and you'll have to see how you do with the grains. So beans are, that's occasionally a problem that people have. Most people have most problems with grains, and that's a much more common problem. So that's why for folks like this that have some difficulties, we have to move people towards squashes are a relatively underutilized source of complex carbohydrates, and so sometimes we have to learn about those and learn how to cook them and sort of get more into those, and that's how we get around that problem.
Very good, thank you. One of the people that submitted a question says, just wondering, what are your thoughts on self-sabotage? Any helpful hints?
Yeah, self-sabotage is there's sort of two things that I would say about this. The first thing is that most of the time when people crumble a little bit and they get off track, they will see this as self-sabotage, but it isn't self-sabotage. What's happening is that they're simply following the natural program that's inside animal nature, and the major guidance system that you have for food, whether you're a gopher or a horse or a human, your guidance system says eat the richest food in the environment. It's a very simple program, and so we can override that program, but only with a significant amount of cognitive dissonance. So a human being is sophisticated enough to have essentially two independent programs running at the same time in its brain. One of them is going to be the instinctual program that says eat the richest food in the environment, and the other is going to be the forebrain bundle that says, wait a second, I heard that wasn't such a good idea. All right, and I heard that this is actually going to undermine my health and undermine my fitness and happiness and attractiveness, so wait a second, I shouldn't be doing this. But folks, that's all learned. None of that's instinctual. So the closest thing it comes to instinct is essentially that you're understanding that this is self-destructive in principle, and so your self-protective instincts then rise up and make this part of your motivation to try to avoid this problem. But this is not a natural problem. This is an unnatural problem, and therefore you will generally lean towards the natural solution, which is to eat the richest food in the environment. So when you do that, this is not being self-destructive. This just means that your determination to have your higher order brain function override lower order function is been compromised. Either you're tired, you've sort of had enough, you're too busy, you don't have enough time, etc. Or you one other thing can be incidentally, so the notion that says eat the richest food, it doesn't say eat the richest food, it says eat the tastiest food. Be really excited about that. Okay, so in other words, that's what's happening. That's the motivational system. That's a difficult problem. So I don't consider that self-destruction. I call that the pleasure trap. So that's simply that your normal motivational system has been hijacked, and it's very hard to unhijack it, but we can. We can do it with organization, diligent effort, good consistency. We can make the pull towards that solution less. Okay, so you can think about, for example, how difficult it is if you have a bunch of really rich, naughty food in the house. It's going to be very difficult to stay out of it because your natural tendencies are going to try to be to consume it. Whereas it's much easier to stay on a healthy track if there isn't any junk food anywhere nearby. You have to go all the way to the store or a restaurant to get it. So statistically, you're going to do a way better job. So that's the problem of the pleasure trap. Now, the person wants me to talk about self-destruction, self-sabotage. That's something different. That is actually a very different looking problem. And so let me describe what it feels like. What it feels like is I've succumbed to the pleasure trap, and part of me is disgusted with myself. And part of me says, well, then just forget the whole thing and just give me the entire half a gallon of ice cream and the heck with it. I'm just going to go for it. That's a self-destructive motivation. And so that self-destructive motivation comes about through a very elegant process where what we have, and this is what I described this in a series of videos, but one of them is called the slow fast way, where we have a webinar on this so people can go back and consult it. But the notion is that let's suppose that you had a parent of a child, and that child was a pretty good student, got mostly A's but a few B's, but was a smart kid, and the parent said, you should get, you're a straight A student, you should get straight A's. Now, if the kid is not sure that they can do it, what they will do is that they will oftentimes completely flunk out. They will make it very clear to the parent that they are not trying. So they did not then fall short of expectations. They kicked over the table and didn't even try. That is a way to save their status with the parent, because the parent has the expectations too high. The child cannot reach those expectations. And so what the child does is go on strike and completely blow up the entire operation. Okay, so this is not an uncommon, this is self-destruction. This is self-sabotage. So this is the kid that's expected to ace the SATs and get into Harvard or Yale at his high school, knowing that he's not going to ace the SATs because he's taken practice tests and he's fallen short. So he's not going to get perfect scores. So what does he do? He goes and gets drunk in front of 15 of his friends the night before the SAT. This is a way to make sure that you have protected your status against the fact that your performance is not going to be living up to standard. Now, the same thing can happen is that the expectations don't have to come from the outside. They can come from the inside. So we have an internal audience that has expectations for us. And those expectations can get set by the fact that you may have done 3 weeks pretty well on the McDougall program, or you may have done 3 months pretty well on the McDougall program. You may have done 6 months well on the McDougall program. And then when you start to get off track, a very interesting thing happens. And the interesting thing happens is that we have now disappointed the internal audience, and we now are not so sure that we can get back on track and be perfect, because we feel that we're struggling with the pleasure trap. So we're actually in some hot water. We're not so sure that we can do it. And as a result, what very often happens is the individual then goes on a self-destructive bender. And they essentially are showing to their internal audience, I'm not even trying. Okay, watch me while I clean out this entire pumpkin pie and a whole bunch of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Why? Because I'm not trying to be on the McDougall plan. I'm not, and this is self-destruction. And so what this comes from is it ultimately comes from the internal audience accepting a standard that is too high and not respecting how difficult the pleasure trap is. Okay, if we truly embrace and understand how tricky the pleasure trap is, and how it seems like we should just be able to walk away from the pleasure trap. We should just be able to hear a lecture by Dr. McDougall and call it good, okay? But that is not how it is. It is a very slippery, devious trap. And so as a result, when we have had some success with it, it makes sense to us that we should be consistently successful, that it shouldn't be a problem. We forget how slippery this trap is. And so once we get back into it, very often we have disappoint our internal audience. And now we kick over the table and we act self-destructively. So this is the roots of self-destructive motivation. And we need to stop this process by essentially honoring how difficult the pleasure trap is, and to understand that once you've teased our way back into it, we're going to have a multiple day fight, probably several days before we actually are even allowed to get back in the groove. And so we have to fight our way back in the groove. We can't just flip a switch. And so that's how I would let people know you are going to have to fight. If you wander off course and you're in a little bit of hot water, accept the fact that it is a remarkable achievement to get out of this thing. It is not an expected achievement. It is a remarkable achievement. And if you've done it before, it did not come easily before, and it won't come easily now. And so don't set the bar too high and kick over the table. Instead, respect yourself and have your internal audience, educate that internal audience in the way I'm trying to help you educate it right now, by saying it's not expected that you get out of the pleasure trap. It's a great achievement to get out every time you get out of it. So that's how, and it takes us several days to get yourself out.
It is a remarkable achievement. I have to agree with that. I do webinars every week with you, with Dr. McDougall, with Chef AJ. So I'm constantly, and I go to lectures and conferences. And one of the things that I want to say that helps me, I don't know if it'll help people out there, is that I constantly, I'm rereading books. I have, 100 books over there. Watching movies, because it's so easy. It's such a slippery road, what you said, that we have to be constantly reminded. And of course, if it's possible to attend conferences and any other events where you're surrounded by people and hear this information over and over and over again, really helps. Talking about over and over and over again, I heard your lecture, Getting Along Without Going Along, many times, and it doesn't matter how many times I hear it. I always get something from that, Dr. Lisle, and it's a brilliant lecture. And one of the people that submitted a question said, what do I do? One of the things you say in that lecture is when people ask you, where do you get your protein, or where do you do this, and all that kind of stuff. You say, well, just mention or say, I'm just trying this for a while and see if it works. It's working right now. But what about someone that has people that know them and they've seen them now for a year or so, and the transformation, and they're still giving them a hard time, and you cannot say anymore, well, I'm trying it for a while, because now you've been doing this for a year or two. Right. What would you say?
Yeah, I would still say that. I would still say, well, it's still, not everything's perfect. And, I'm still learning, and I'm still going to try it a while longer. Okay. And so we kick the thing out over probably another 3 months. And this is how we put people to sleep. So there is nothing as permanent as the recurrent temporary. We just keep making a temporary statement, and then we put people to sleep with this. So, well, when do you need to eat meat? I know that you do. It could be a problem. Well, you're probably right. Probably right. And, I'm still working on some things, and I'm going to give this a little more try and just see how it keeps going. Very simple. We're not confronting. They insist that we're wrong. We just agree with them. Yeah, you're probably right.
Right.
We'll just see how it goes, and leave it alone. I have learned that this is at least as bad as any religious or political disagreement, that you'll ever see. This is very threatening to people, and they believe consciously like they are concerned for your health, which they're not particularly. Probably about 5% of their mind or 3% of their mind is concerned about your health. And 97% of their mind is concerned that you are doing something fancy that's fancier than they are, that requires conscientiousness and intelligence to do it, and that it's a demonstration of superiority, okay? And they do not want you to get away with this. And so they will attack it, and the solution is to signal to them that we are not doing this to demonstrate superiority. So, and to get out of the temptation that we are bringing this information to the village and that we deserve a whole bunch of credit. The truth is that this is great information, and the teaching gene that resides in all humans that wants to share information knows full well that if you share this information with them and they implemented it, they would unwind a tremendous amount of trouble in their lives, and then they should be kissing your feet for the rest of their lives. That's how it should be, but it's not going to be. Okay? And so as a result, we have to essentially learn our way around our own instincts that say, bring the information to the village, bring it to the village, get credit for it, bring it to the village, because this is how we demonstrate our worthiness to belong. And we have to essentially kick this particular one aside and just say, not sure about anything. Trying it out, interesting, seems to be working for me, not sure how it's going to go. And we just completely shuck and jive our way around this whole cross-examination. That's a very easy way to deal with things.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, now a funny question. Okay,
Yes.
so someone says, why is Dr. Lisle so adorable?
Well, that's what my mom
It's just a natural gift, right?
Well, in the same way, I've got one cat that's kind of ornery and one cat that's kind of sweet. And some of us are born a little more ornery and some of us are born sweet. So you and I, Gustavo, were born sweet. Dr. McDougall, he was born a little more ornery, and that's just how it is.
That's how it is, people, okay?
Yeah.
There's no secret. Well, okay, so now back to another question. How long does it take to neuroadapt to the taste of whole natural food without sugar, oil, and salt so that you actually enjoy it? When you relapse, do you have to start this process all over again from day one, or do your taste buds adapt quicker?
Yes. Now let's talk about what happens. The research evidence would indicate that a true full-on neuroadaptation to whole natural food would probably be about 4 months. But that's not linear, folks. So you'll probably do 75 or 80% of that sensitivity in 30 days. So we actually see a lot of it within 10 days of the McDougall program. People probably are halfway out of the trap in 10 days, and then they spend the next, 110 days getting out of the rest of the trap. And that's how it works. That's how it works in AA. So in AA, the first 3 months are by far the hardest 3 months in AA. And then the person gets better and better at the process of staying out of alcohol for the next many years. But the most important action is going to take place in the 3 months. So the same thing is true with food, except food isn't as potent as alcohol. And so as a result, you will go an awful long ways in literally 2 or 3 weeks. So now, let's suppose that you've been doing a good job for a month and you've had almost nothing naughty, or you haven't had anything naughty at all in a month. And now you have, a piece of my infamous carrot cake. Are we starting from zero now? No, we are not. We are almost where we were before we had the carrot cake. In fact, we are very, very close. Here's where we're not, though. So in terms of the neuroadaptation of the tongue and the olfactory system, you haven't lost hardly any ground at all, if any, from some transgression. But that's not the problem. The problem is that we now have a memory in the system. So your motivational system is essentially run by memories. Your motivational system is actually run by an interaction of 3 things. Number one, you have the general motivational mechanism that sits inside of every human. So you want to be at a certain temperature, you need certain kinds of foodstuffs of different kinds of textures and nutrients. So that's why you like sugar, fat, and salt, etc. And you don't like wood because you're not a termite. See, you're a human. So you don't want to be living at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't want to live in the water anywhere. So you're a human being, and therefore you have a universal value system that makes you a human. There's going to be two sources of data that come in that value system, or your mind essentially makes decisions on. Those two sources of data are, number one, your immediate sensory inputs. So just like any other animal, you use your five senses to determine what your environmental circumstances are to help you make decisions. This is why, for example, if you walk by Cinnabon and you smell it, it's a problem, because your system is designed by nature to use its immediate contact with the environment as the primary data source for making decisions. There's a secondary data source that it uses. The more sophisticated the animal, the more memory circuits it has. So human beings have phenomenal memory circuits. So they can remember what something tasted like that they haven't had in 25 years. And so they can remember where a little store was located, where they met a friend of theirs for the first time, a record store on Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles when they were 16. And they can remember it very well. That's not something that other animals can do. And so we have that's a big reason for your huge brain, because a big memory system essentially enables you to estimate your environmental circumstances more accurately than another creature that doesn't have a big memory system. So there is a good chance that that record store is still there. It's still on the same side of the street that I remember. It's about the amount of square footage. You see what I'm saying? So if you're a human being and you have a tremendous memory system, you essentially have a better map of the environment than if you didn't have any memory system at all. So if I can remember that a mile down the river and across the way, the cherries come in at about April, when the sun is about so high in the sky. That's a fantastic memory system to add to the immediate sensory environment, the immediate sensory information. And between those two things, the internal computer figures out what's the right move. If you were just dealing with immediate sensory information, you would essentially lose all the value of being able to compute things that you can't see into the equation. But you can remember things that you can't see. And so it is, in fact, memories and immediate sensory information come together to compete with each other and interact with each other to come up with what you should be doing. This is a very long explanation to the following issue. And that is that if you eat a piece of carrot cake today, then tomorrow you're going to remember that carrot cake, and you're going to remember it very well. And you have the memory systems create images. That's why we call it your imagination, that you actually can have an olfactory. You can almost smell it, and you can almost taste it, and you can definitely see it. You could actually even hear your fork clanking on the plate a day later, that you can almost recreate that experience. And so as a result of this, those memories are very hot. In other words, they're really vivid if they happened yesterday. And as a result, it's as if they are almost in the sensory environment. Well, the sensory environment is the thing that's going to pull you the hardest, because that's your natural programming. But if it's really hot in memory, it's pulling pretty hard as well. Now, if you haven't had a piece of carrot cake in a year, it's not pulling very hard. It's in your memory, but it's very faint, so it's not having as big of impact. So the problem with the pleasure trap, or with stumbling and having a little relapse, the problem is not the neuroadaptation of the tongue. That's not what gets you. This afternoon, when you get hungry, whole natural food will still taste very good. The problem is that the memory is now red hot, and you're very likely to circle back around there tomorrow and have another piece of that carrot cake, okay? And then that means the next day we're likely to have a piece of the carrot cake. Now when we build a chain of transgressions, now we're starting to cause the neuroadaptation of the tongue. That's how that's going to work. So it's useful for people to know that when you wander off course, the danger is not that the tongue neuroadapts. The danger is that we're going to set up a repetitive self-reinforcing chain of a transgression. And so that means when you wander off the reservation, the most important thing that you do is that you slam on the brakes and realize you're going to have to fight this for about 3 days. Okay? 3 days in, the memories are starting to fade very significantly. And so by the 4th day, they're back down to a very sane and reasonable level. So it's useful for you to know that if you wander off, which we're all going to, unless you're Alan Goldhammer, or AJ, so these people don't wander off anywhere. But if you're the rest of us, you're going to wander off. But when you wander off, you need to know, okay, now I need to pay the price. The price will not be that I won't like tasty food. I will still like healthy, tasty food, but I will have a calling to me from my memory circuit to eat that rich food again. And that one I need to gut it out until it quiets down. And so I'm going to face a few days of challenge. And that's the challenge that we need to face.
Right.
It's time limited.
Exactly. Okay.
Yes.
Very good.
Somebody's saying they want carrot cake now. Yeah, it's entertaining because it shows you how good the human imagination is.
That's right.
So even with words, you can activate these things very effectively, which means if words can do it, you can only imagine what a recent sensory experience can do. And that's why that's the real source of the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dr. Lisle, someone here says that they have reverse diabetes, but now seem to have hypoglycemia. Is there a higher fat diet that is healthy to eat, as my doctor says that I should lower carbs?
You should be talking to a different doctor. No, if you're hypoglycemic, the chronic hypoglycemia, I don't know even exists. So temporary hypoglycemia can exist, but that's usually as a result of a little bit of a sluggish liver not kicking out glycogen that effectively. So we don't, there are things that we would do. I would want to know whether the person is getting any kind of regular exercise, because that is probably a useful thing to get the liver used to kicking out glycogen more often. But we definitely don't move towards a higher fat diet to try to get the person sicker so that their blood sugar levels go up, so we can mimic a little bit of diabetes. No, this is not what we do. So if the person, I can actually remember one case many years ago at Trinity Health Center where we had a woman that had some sort of chronic intermittent hypoglycemia for probably 20 years. And we were convinced that this was a bit of a congested liver. That's typically what we see. And so we fasted her, and she actually had to come for about 3 or 4 years. She fasted once a year for about 3 or 4 years for about 7 days or so. And it was finally on the 4th water fast that there was some kind of a resolution. And then the problem was resolved and never came back. So we got multiple year follow-up on her, and the problem was over. So this is, so that, the solution is not to eat, quote, a fatty diet. That's the wrong way to go. But this is a very good question for Dr. McDougall, either in a webinar or on an email. He might have some dietary suggestions, but I'm pretty sure it won't be adding olive oil to anything.
Right.
Yes.
An interesting question here. Let's see. What does true hunger feel like? Is there a difference between true hunger and emotional hunger when it comes to whole foods? Sometimes my stomach is full, but my mind wants more.
Yes, there's a reason why the hunger drive is going to be complicated, and there's going to be multiple motivational systems that are going to be involved. So let's look at what happens as people get full on whole natural food and why they still might be hungry. You have to appreciate that there are really two major motivational systems that are the important mechanisms to satisfy in life for any animal, and that's food and sex. So as a result, what we're going to see is that food, this is like a really big deal. It is very important. And as we sit down and we seem like we're finished eating, the system is still saying, well, is there any food around? Is there any more profit that we could possibly biologically help ourselves if we ate a little bit more? If we have some options, which of the ones should we be eating? The system doesn't say, oh, well, you've had enough to eat. There's a Safeway store, you know, half a mile from here with plenty of food in it that you're never going to go hungry. Let's get back to your own personal growth programs, do some yoga, read, you know, a new novel or new nonfiction work by Jared Diamond and learn about guns, germs, and steel, and let's become more educated. No, that's not what it's doing. It's saying, is there anything else in the environment that's worth eating? Okay, that's about one of the most important things that it can possibly figure out. And that's what it was designed to figure out. It's going to try to figure out, is there anything else that it can eat that's worthwhile? It scans the environment, and it runs a cost-benefit analysis on mating behavior. And it very likely, if it's in my case, there's nobody in the environment and there's nothing worth, there's no target worth seeking. All right, so this is how it works. I mean, and so as a result now, if that's the situation, you also, mating behavior is more intense and it's more intermittent. There's other motivational systems that are working automatically, like breathing. They're working automatically and constant, but eating is probably the main, most intense, biggest time factor that animals do. And so in the wild, you will find that the majority of animals' time is spent procuring food. And in fact, that's actually true of humans in the third world. Humans in the third world spend most of the days of their life, most of the hours of their existence, doing things related to getting more food. And so it's becoming less true as we get more effective at getting food in those places. But this has actually been the case in the United States as recently as 100 years ago. And so it's no surprise that the motivational system that's built into you is unbelievably interested in food. Okay, so this is, so now when we start talking about this issue of true hunger and what true hunger is, I mean, I've heard these bizarre discussions by non-physiological psychologists taking place and a bunch of speculation about people that don't know. So let's talk about things. When you're hungry, you're hungry. When people say, well, actually, I was just thirsty, I wasn't hungry, that true hunger is in the throat or in the, forget it, none of this is true. The system would not be so stupid as to not know when it's hungry. You see what I'm saying? You don't say, oh, well, gee, I made a mistake. I'm scratching my elbow, but I forgot to breathe. I don't know why, but I had this motivation to scratch my elbow. And that's not true elbow scratching. Actually, I should have been breathing instead. No, the motivational system can't possibly be sent off track and be that stupid. These systems are literally 1 billion years old. They are infallible. So when you feel hungry, you're hungry, not thirsty. That's how that works. Now, when you are reasonably full, what's happening is that the motivation for eating is dropping, as it should. Okay, that's all fine. So, and now what we're going to find is that people are really not interested in cramming their stomach full of carrots. That's not what happens. We very clearly see that people's motivation to continue eating even whole natural foods. What do you mean by whole natural foods? Well, I've had this discussion with at least 500 people. Let me tell you what the whole natural foods are that they're eating when they're already comfortably full. Dates, nuts, you know, isn't almond butter a whole natural food? In other words, what? It's fun watching you nod your head, Gustavo. There's a little too vigorous of nodding. And so, in other words, what we're going to find is it's going to be high calorie density whole natural foods that are suddenly going to be the thing that's worth eating. And the reason why that's true is that the most dense foods in a landscape are, by their very nature, they're the most valuable. And it's going to turn out, because they're the most valuable, human beings lived in packs. And so you can assume that if there's a bunch of valuable food around, the other people are going to eat it, and it's going to be gone before you know it. And if you don't know that, then your genes are going to be left off the planet pretty soon. So the genes that made it are the genes that are hyper vigilant about keeping track about where the high density calories are. And even if you are full, cram a few more in, because they're not going to be here by the morning. See? So that's what you're going to see. Right. So now we've ended the mystery as to what true hunger is. It's all true hunger. So what's happening, though, is that even when you're not very hungry because you're pretty full, the system still says, let's look around the environment. Let's see if there's any really high calorie dense foods around. If there are, let's infer that they're probably not going to be here to buy tomorrow morning, because some other slitherly unprincipled member of the tribe is going to come in and get it. Now, that might be your 4-year-old child, or it might be your wife, okay? But somebody's going to get it, all right? And you intuitively have this feeling that that's a problem. And so you're designed by nature to swallow all of it that you can, up to the point where you feel almost slightly ill. And this is why we don't want a lot of that rich food in your environment. Okay, that rich food hanging around after you were fully satiated would have been a relatively rare event in the Stone Age. And so your circuit says cram it in there until you're all the way to the gills, if it's there. And so if you have it around constantly, you've now put yourself in an unnatural environment. And what we're going to observe then is an unnatural eating pattern that's going to be taking place, where we're going to be cramming ourselves to the gills every night if the stuff's around.
Right.
That's the problem. Okay?
Very good. Dr. Lisle, inevitably we get questions every time about people that either have high blood pressure and can't lower it on a whole food plant-based diet, or they have they can't lose weight, they say, or they can't lower the sugar levels. And I'm just curious, because everybody that I've seen attend the 10-day program at Dr. McDougall, the blood pressure comes down in the day or two. You know, they lose weight. Same thing at True North. I mean, so when people say things like that, would
Yes.
it be really that there is something in the food that they're eating? You would, like, for you to be able to tell, would you have to have a diary of everything that they eat every day for a week? What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I can understand. I think I'm not going to say that this is true of every one of these cases, but I would say this is true in at least 80 to 90% of these cases. And that is that folks usually don't understand. They may make changes and they may do a good job for a week or so, and then they wander a little bit off. They're looking for sometimes very fast results. So when I actually explain to people, for example, the process of weight loss, very smart people who think they know an awful lot and actually are pretty educated, actually are pretty lost about the pace that we might expect weight loss to take place and what might be required to get there. So, for example, a pound is on the order of 3,500 to 4,000 calories. So to lose a pound in a week is pretty staggering. In other words, that means that in 7 days, you shed 500 calories a day, which means you ate underneath the requirements to maintain your body weight by 500 calories. That's a very substantial amount to undereat, and to do it consistently for a week, to lose a pound is pretty remarkable. So so it's not surprising that very often people might lose a half a pound a week. So they might lose 2 to 3 pounds in a month. Well, 2 weeks into this, when it appears they haven't lost anything, that they've gone from 169 to 168 and it really doesn't look like anything's happening, 2 weeks in, they would have thought they would see a very substantial difference in their weight. That, 2 weeks worth of super diligent effort, they should have gone to maybe 163. Maybe they would have lost, 4 or 5 pounds in a couple of weeks. They're not understanding it's a lot more subtle than that. and that the pace of weight loss on the order of, for example, 2/3 of a pound a week is actually quite substantial. And so in a year at that rate, you'd lose 35 pounds. That's a tremendous change in somebody's life. So one of the reasons that happens, one of the reasons we get these discussions is that because people don't understand actually the speed of change. Sometimes, and the thing is Dr. McDougall will talk about situations where sometimes the speed of change is dramatic and very fast. That is true. So sometimes you will get people that go from a really rich diet and they're way overweight, they go to a McDougall diet and they lose 2 pounds a week. But a lot of our people are not going to go from a horrendous diet to a good diet. They're going from a pretty darn good diet to a little bit better diet. So we're not going to expect 2 pounds a week weight loss. We're going to expect 2/3 of a pound a week. And 2/3 of a pound a week, if it's not stacking up to your expectations 2 or 3 weeks later, you quit on it. And you're like, well, what's the point? Now I'm going to go out with my husband and I'm just going to have that such and such that I always like here. Well, now you just had a little dose of sodium and a little dose of fat, and you absorbed a little bit of water, and you get on the scale, and now it says that you haven't lost any weight in 3 weeks. Now you may have. You may have lost 1.5 pounds, but now you can't tell because you just wandered off the reservation for 5 minutes, got a little extra sodium in you, and now you're demoralized. So the problem is that going from B work to A work, which is a lot of times what's required. Sometimes people have lost 40 pounds and they hit an equilibrium. So they were 229 and now they're 189. And they still have 40 pounds to lose, but they've hit sort of an interesting equilibrium biologically. And they've done this by doing B work. Now the truth is that they're going to have to do A work. If they're going to get to 149 pounds, it's going to be A work. And so they do A work for a week or 2 or 3, and that now not that much changes. So the speed of change isn't that fast and they get demoralized. So I think that isn't the only reason. There are people that may have other issues and that their situations may be individually trickier. But I will submit to you that of all the counseling I've done in all the years, that is the biggest mistake. So it's not like they're lying to us. It's not like they didn't really try. It isn't like they weren't significantly diligent. What they had was their expectations significantly violated, and therefore they did not remain diligent because they didn't believe in it. And that's the biggest problem that I see.
All right.
Okay.
We're coming to a close, Dr. Lisle. I just want to mention to everyone watching, I do see your questions here in the chat. I also have like 500 questions here that you'll submit. So, it is just not possible to fit them all in, but please be patient because every second Tuesday of the month, we do a webinar, Dr. Lisle and I, as part of the Dr. McDougall series. And if you keep logging in, your question will be asked. Also, you can send your question ahead of time to webinar@drmcdougall.com, which I just put on the chat. And I try to keep a balance between your questions and the questions that some people have already submitted. And that's how we go. So we will not be able to answer all the questions today, but hopefully we will as we progress. One more question, Dr. Lisle. And this one has to do with people, well, I'm just going to read this here. Someone wrote and said that they have joined a group which follows a whole food plant-based diet with no sugar, oil, flour, salt, but they still are constantly thinking about food. What I will eat next, when can I eat again, where to shop for various foods, and she or he buy foods that they already have because they look good, new, interesting. When I finish eating breakfast, I can't wait until lunch, and after lunch, I can't wait for dinner. I think about food all through the day, all day long. I eat plenty, don't restrict portions or count calories. How do I get over this food obsession?
Oh, well, that's a little bit interesting. I think that I'm not sure what they're going through, and it's possible that what they've got is they've got some dissonance in the fact that they're searching for maybe some of the richer foods, and the saltier and sugar foods in their recent history. And so they're actually in some cognitive dissonance. In other words, the system, the part of their mind is saying, we're on this new path, this is what we're going to eat. And then their memory circuits say, wait a second, I'm not so sure this is the right thing. And so they wind up, once again, this now, when there's a conflict between two motivations, it's gonna, you will see that conflict in your consciousness as you'll see evidence go back and forth, and it's stirring up the system and making you think about it because it's trying to determine the right thing. So if this is, for example, if you're trying to buy a new truck and you've talked to the Chevy people and you've talked to the Ford people and you're having a hard time deciding, you're going to be tossing and turning about this and really thinking about it. So I think that this person is in a transition process where they are getting used to this idea, and that they have not quieted down all of the questions that their Stone Age brain has about whether or not this is really a good idea. And as they become more acclimated to the food, and this becomes more of a habit pattern, and we are not questioning whether or not this is what we're going to be doing, this should quiet down to the point where you're not obsessing about food any more than you obsess about anything.
Right.
Okay.
Very good. Well, thank you. We have almost used an hour, and of course, it just flies by because
sure does.
Interesting. Thank you so much. You are some of the most brilliant minds that I know, and we all are very lucky to have you here. Thank you, Dr. Lisle. We look forward to seeing you the second Tuesday of December. And I do, and I know everybody here wants to wish you a very happy holiday and Thanksgiving.
Oh, it's great to be here. It's great to see you, as always, Gustavo, and glad to have that we were able to make it all work today.
Very good, very good. I just, very briefly, I want to show everyone, well, I don't know if I will be able to, let's see if I can do this. I want to show everyone really quick the website for Dr. McDougall, so that if you're interested in this, you can go there and you can go under programs here, and you can go to the 10-day living program, and from there you can see the schedule, you can see an example of the schedule, you can see the brochure, and sometimes you can even see the recipes, although the recipes are here as well. And from here you can go ahead and add to cart, select the date, and sign up for one of the 10-day programs, and I hope that you will consider that. And with that, we will close the webinar, and I wish all of you happy Thanksgiving. We will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you, Dr. Lisle. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You bet.